Imagine running one of the most advanced factories on Earth. Not in a poor country, not in a war zone, not under sanctions, but in the very heart of Europe. Your machines are modern, your supply chains are intact, your workers are highly trained, orders are waiting to be filled. And yet, the factory floor is silent. Not because demand collapsed, not because labor walked out, not because a crisis made headlines, but because for the first time in generations, turning the lights on costs more than staying shut down. This isn't a dystopian future. It's happening right now across Europe's industrial core. What makes it so unsettling is how ordinary everything still looks. Paychecks still arrive, cities still function, cafes are full, trains still run. There is no visible collapse, and that's exactly the problem. Because underneath that calm surface, something fundamental has stopped moving. And that stillness is dangerous because it doesn't feel like a crisis. There are no sirens, no emergency summits, no dramatic headlines screaming collapse. Instead, there is delay. Investment decisions pushed back, one quarter at a time, hiring plans quietly frozen. Maintenance budgets get trimmed just enough to be noticed, but not enough to alarm anyone. Growth doesn't disappear, it thins. Momentum doesn't break, it drains. And when an industrial system loses momentum, it doesn't fail all at once. It locks itself in place. That's what makes this story different from a recession or a crash. This isn't about panic, it's about paralysis. And paralysis is far harder to reverse than failure. For decades, Europe built its prosperity on a simple promise: reliable energy and world-class industrial output out. That promise wasn't glamorous, it wasn't ideological, it was practical. And now, quietly, that promise is breaking. Not with a crash, not with panic, but with stagnation. What makes this story truly disturbing is that none of this happened by accident. There was no natural disaster forcing Europe's hand, no unavoidable shock, no enemy marching tanks across its borders, at least not at first. Instead, this was a chain of decisions, each one defensible on its own, each one politically popular at the time. Together, they stacked into one of the most expensive, self-inflicted economic mistakes in recent European history. This is the story of how Europe's largest economy tried to engineer a perfect green future and ended up freezing its industrial engine instead. Stay with me, because once you see how this trap was built, you'll realize why it isn't just Europe's problem anymore. To understand how Europe walked into this trap, we have to rewind. Not to Brussels, not to Berlin, but to a moment that happened on the other side of the planet. In 2010, Germany was in a surprisingly strong position. Its energy system wasn't perfect, but it was balanced. Coal provided reliability, renewables were growing steadily, and most importantly, nuclear power supplied a stable backbone. About a quarter of Germany's electricity came from nuclear plants. They were carbon-free, they were stable, and they were already paid for. The plan at the time was almost boring. Use nuclear as a bridge. Keep emissions low. Let renewables scale gradually over decades. No rush, no drama, no ideology. Then came March 2011. A massive earthquake off the coast of Japan triggered a tsunami that overwhelmed the Fukushima nuclear plant. It was a tragedy. Lives were lost, communities were destroyed. But here's the part that matters. Fukushima happened 5,000 miles away from Germany, in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth, involving an aging reactor design. Germany has no tsunamis. Germany has no major earthquakes. Germany's reactors were built to entirely different standards. Logic would have suggested a review, a reassessment, a tightening of safety protocols. But politics does not run on logic. It runs on fear. Public panic spread rapidly. Anti-nuclear movements surged overnight. Decades of latent opposition suddenly found its moment, and politicians felt the ground shifting beneath them. What makes this moment extraordinary is not just the decision, but who made it. Angela Merkel was not an activist. She was not an ideologue. She was a trained physicist. She understood probabilities. She understood systems. She understood trade-offs. And yet, under political pressure, she reversed course. Within days of Fukushima, Germany announced a complete nuclear phase-out. Not gradual, not conditional, immediate. 8 reactors shut down almost overnight. 17 fully functional, zero-carbon power plants were marked for extinction. This wasn't a transition, it was demolition. Imagine ripping out a perfectly working furnace in the middle of winter, not after installing a replacement, but with the promise that solar panels might save you someday. That single decision removed Germany's safety net. The deeper problem wasn't just the loss of nuclear power, it was the loss of time. Nuclear plants are not light switches. Once you shut them down, you don't simply turn them back on. Skilled operators leave. Supply chains dissolve. Regulatory approvals expire. What Germany destroyed wasn't just electricity generation, it destroyed institutional memory. At the same time, renewables were given an impossible job. Wind and solar were no longer supplements. They were expected to replace a stable base load immediately. That forced the system into constant improvisation. Every calm summer day masked the risk. Every cold winter night exposed it. And with nuclear gone, there was no margin for error. Energy policy stopped being engineering. It became crisis management. And here's the first twist. After shutting down nuclear power, in the name of environmental responsibility, Germany turned back to lignite coal, the dirtiest, the most carbon-intensive. The worst fossil fuels still in regular use. Entire villages were flattened. To expand open-pit coal mines, wind turbines were literally dismantled. To dig up more coal beneath them, $500 billion were poured into the energy transition. And for nearly a decade, carbon emissions barely moved. Not because renewables failed, but because Germany destroyed its clean backbone. Before the replacement was ready, this was the original sin. Everything that followed, high prices, industrial decline, political backlash, flows directly from this moment. The irony wasn't just environmental, it was economic. Lignite coal isn't just dirty, it's inefficient. It requires massive land use, massive logistics, massive political cost. Entire communities were relocated to feed a system that was supposed to be temporary. And yet the temporary solution became permanent. Because once infrastructure is built, it demands to be used. Germany didn't transition away from fossil fuels. It locked itself into the worst possible ones, at the worst possible moment. Once nuclear power was gone, Germany faced a problem it could no longer ignore. Wind and solar are intermittent. Factories are not. Steel mills cannot pause for cloudy weather. Chemical plants cannot shut down when the wind dies. Germany needed a backup. That backup was natural gas. And Germany didn't just buy gas, it built its entire industrial model around it. For decades, Berlin followed a doctrine called change through trade. The idea was simple, elegant, and dangerously naive. If economies became deeply intertwined, geopolitics would soften. Dependence would create peace. Russia would modernize. Conflict would become irrational. That belief was cemented under the Baltic Sea, in the form of Nord Stream. Not one pipeline, 2 direct, massive arteries designed to pump cheap Siberian gas straight into the core of German industry. By 2021, the numbers were staggering. 55% of Germany's natural gas came from Russia. This wasn't diversification, it was addiction. Warnings came early, warnings came often. Poland warned them, Ukraine warned them, the Baltic states warned them. You are handing Moscow a kill switch for your economy. In 2018, the warning went global. At the United Nations, Germany was told publicly that it was making itself dangerously dependent on Russian energy. The reaction wasn't concern, it was laughter. 4 years later, history arrived with tanks. In February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Gas flows were throttled. Markets panicked. Prices didn't rise, they went vertical. At the peak, spot prices surged by nearly 1,000%. Overnight, German manufacturers faced energy bills. That made production mathematically impossible to sustain. This is where the trap snapped shut. The damage wasn't limited to prices, it reshaped corporate behavior. Long-term contracts became impossible to price. Energy hedging stopped working. Forecasting broke down. When a core input becomes unpredictable, risk doesn't rise linearly. It explodes. German firms didn't just lose competitiveness, they lost confidence. And confidence is what keeps capital at home. Once it disappears, money doesn't argue. It relocates, quietly, permanently. This is how an energy shock becomes a structural shift. Not through collapse, but through choice. When energy becomes unreliable, companies don't protest. They leave. Germany doesn't run on apps or social media platforms. It runs on factories, chemicals, machines, cars. And when energy becomes unaffordable, those things move quietly and permanently. The clearest signal came from BASF. For decades, its Ludwigshafen complex was the beating heart of German industry. Cheap energy wasn't a bonus, it was the foundation. In 2023, BASF announced permanent downsizing in Europe. Thousands of jobs were cut. Entire production lines were shut down. New investment didn't flow to France or Spain or another EU country. It flowed to China because energy is cheaper, regulation is predictable, and factories are welcome. They weren't alone. Miele shifted production east. Volkswagen began looking across the Atlantic. Economists call this structural change. That's a polite phrase. A more honest word is deindustrialization. Because when heavy industry leaves, it rarely comes back. The skills fade, the ecosystems dissolve, the middle class erodes, and it all happens quietly. Deindustrialization doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with factory gates slamming shut overnight. It arrives as a decision not to expand, a decision not to modernize, and a decision not to rebuild. The old factory keeps running until it doesn't. And when it finally closes, it isn't replaced, because the replacement was built somewhere else years earlier. This is why energy policy is destiny for industrial nations. You can survive high taxes, you can survive regulation, you can even survive slow growth, but you cannot survive unreliable energy, especially not when your economy is built on exports. Germany's competitive edge was never cheap labor, it was predictable systems. And energy was the most important one. Germany's energy problem isn't just about fuel, it's about geography. Most wind blows in the north. Most factories sit in the south. Moving power should have been boring infrastructure work. Instead, it became a bureaucratic nightmare. Years of lawsuits, permitting delays, not in my backyard protests. Transmission lines were buried underground, tripling costs, and pushing completion well into the late 2020s. So today, something absurd happens. When wind turbines spin at full speed in the north, the grid overloads. To prevent blackouts, operators order them to shut down. But the payments don't stop. In 2022 alone, congestion costs reached roughly 4.2 billion euros. Consumers paid for renewable energy. That was never delivered. Then paid again for coal and gas plants to keep factories running. This isn't a transition. It's an accounting illusion, built on inefficiency. The grid failure revealed something deeper. Planning had been replaced by compromise. Every delay was justified. Every concession seemed reasonable. Every protest was accommodated until the system itself became incoherent. Energy flowed where politics allowed, not where physics required. This turned the grid into a liability. Instead of stabilizing the system, it amplified volatility. And volatility is poison for industry. Factories don't need perfect energy. They need predictable energy. Germany delivered the opposite. By 2023, policymakers needed a win. Industry was hard to decarbonize, so they turned to households. Oil and gas boilers were effectively banned. Heat pumps were mandated. The technology wasn't the problem. Reality was old homes, poor insulation, upfront costs of $20,000 to $50,000. The backlash was explosive. Approval ratings collapsed. Extremist parties surged. Households panicked and rushed to install new gas boilers. Before the ban kicked in, emissions were locked in for decades. And when emissions finally fell, it wasn't because the transition succeeded. It was because factories shut down. That's not decarbonization. That's economic amputation. What failed here wasn't technology. It was sequencing. Governments tried to change consumption, Before fixing supply, they tried to mandate behavior before lowering costs. And when people resist, policymakers mistake hesitation for ignorance. In reality, it was calculation. Households did the math, and the math didn't work. When policy ignores arithmetic, voters don't adapt. They rebel. So here we are. It's 2025. Germany isn't collapsing, but it isn't growing either. Stagnation has replaced momentum, and the rest of the world is watching. India, Vietnam. Emerging economies aren't rejecting climate goals. They're rejecting fragility. They are choosing reliability first. Because energy policy lives in the real world. Physics doesn't care about intentions. Grids don't respond to moral arguments. Factories don't run on virtue. Germany spent $500 billion to learn that lesson. The rest of the world doesn't have to. Build first, transition second. Germany's experience now serves as a warning label, not because renewables are useless, not because climate goals are wrong, but because systems matter, timing matters, and baseload matters most of all. The countries watching this unfold are learning faster than Europe did. They are building redundancy. They are preserving optionality. They understand something Germany forgot. Energy transitions are not moral journeys. They are engineering problems. With political consequences, respect physics, count the costs. Because energy policy doesn't forgive mistakes, it just sends the bill.